Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. Today I have an author interview with Emily Liebert. Emily has an interesting career. She starts as a journalist, transitions an author with a nonfiction book, then wrote women's fiction, and now she's writing mystery thrillers. In this interview, we chat about what it's like to write a page-turning mystery thriller, an in-depth conversation about her latest release, Perfectly Famous, and of course, a round of book recommendations. Now let's go to the interview. Hi, Emily. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, all things considered. It's been a tough week. I'm not going to lie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have. So tell us a little about yourself.
So I am an author. This is my 7th book, Perfectly Famous, that came out this week. And I am also a mom and a wife. And now during the quarantine, I am also a chef and a teacher and everything else that my kids possibly need during this time.
Yeah, I can imagine. And we've been on month 3 of the quarantine, so
I think so, yeah.
it's never ending. So, all right. So you work as an editor-in-chief and with ABC News. How did this experience inform your writing practice?
So from a very early age, I always knew I wanted to do something in the world of journalism. Mm-hmm. So at first, I actually thought I wanted to be a radio sportscaster. Mm-hmm. But it turns out you need to know a lot about sports to do that. And I knew a lot about baseball at the time, but I didn't know a lot about any other sport. So that career quickly fell to the wayside. But I did think I wanted to still be like in TV or radio in some way. So I was really lucky when I graduated from college. I got a job working for Peter Jennings Reporting, which was Peter Jennings' documentary show at ABC News. And I did that for a couple of years and I really enjoyed it, but it became clear that it wasn't what I actually wanted to do moving forward. I wasn't that passionate about it. Mm-hmm. What I really wanted to do was write. So I got a job as a magazine editor, as the editor-in-chief of the WAG magazine, which for those who don't live in my area is a luxury lifestyle magazine that covers Westchester County, Fairfield County, Connecticut, and some of Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And I did that for 5 years. And I also loved that a lot, but I started thinking about sinking my teeth into bigger writing projects. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to edit Kerry Kennedy's book, which was a New York Times bestseller called Being Catholic Now. Mm-hmm. And after that, I really got a bug to write a book and to write my own book. And that was how I sort of got into that.
And so what was your journey to get that first book published?
Oh, it was super easy. No, just kidding. I know I always make it sound like it just all happened, but it's definitely not easy to get a book published. And I think that it is exponentially more difficult to get a book published now than when I first had a book published, which was in 2010, mm-hmm. Which means that I got the deal in 2009, which was, 11 years ago. Wow, that was great math on my part. That was really quick. So what I did was I wrote an entire book. I wrote a whole novel. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't realize that if you want to get an agent, you have to write a whole book if it's fiction. Mm-hmm. If it's nonfiction, you can get away with writing a proposal and a few sample chapters. But I was writing a novel, so I wrote the whole book, and I queried through a website called agentquery.com, which I found online. And I queried, I think, 80 agents. And I heard back from a number of them, but a lot of them said either I have something too similar on my list or best of luck, but this doesn't sound like it's up my alley. And then a handful of them said, please send me more of the book, send me 50 pages, send me the whole manuscript, whatever it was. And I ended up getting, I think, 2 or 3 offers from agents. I was really lucky. And I picked one who I thought was the best for me. And that novel that I got that agent with, who is not my agent today, even though I still adore her, that novel has never seen the light of day. While my agent and I were getting that novel ready to be submitted to publishing houses, I came up with the idea for what was actually my first book, which was a narrative nonfiction book called Facebook Fairy Tales. And it was 25 amazing stories that came from Facebook connections. And it came out right when Facebook was exploding in the media. I was really lucky to get an interview with Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook, for the foreword. And once the sort of hoopla of that book passed, I realized that I no longer loved that first novel, and I never wanted anyone to read it, and that I wanted to write a new novel. And so I wrote a new novel, which was my first novel, called You Knew Me When. And by that time, I had also switched agents because I felt that the agent I was with was wonderful, but she was better with YA than she was with women's fiction, which I was writing. Fine. And I found my now agent, Alyssa Rubin at Paradigm, who I've been with for 10 years. And she sold You Knew Me When and When We Fall, which was my second novel, to Penguin Random House.
And so you wrote women's fiction and then you transitioned to what it would be like mystery thrillers, you know. So what was that transition like?
So I wrote 4 women's fiction novels after Facebook Fairy Tales, all for Penguin Random House, You Knew Me When and When We Fall. And then there was a second 2-book deal, which was Those Secrets We Keep and Some Women. And once I had written Some Women, I loved writing women's fiction. And I think that my books still straddle the line between women's fiction and psychological suspense. But I definitely wanted to write something a little edgier. I wanted to challenge myself a little bit more with a fast-paced plot that was really page-turning. My women's fiction obviously had plots, but they were more character-driven, I felt like. And I really wanted sort of a high-intensity plot. And so I also decided at that time that since I was switching genres, I would switch editors and publishing houses. I loved Penguin Random House. I loved my editor there, but I just sort of wanted a whole new start, a fresh team, a fresh life breathed into my career. And so I wrote Pretty Revenge, which was my last book. And I went out on submission again for the first time in, like 8 or 9 years, which was crazy because I never needed to resubmit a book to Penguin Random House once I was already there. They just let me, write little outlines. And I ended up at Gallery at Simon & Schuster, which I'm very happy about. And I ended up there for Pretty Revenge and for Perfectly Famous, which is the book that just came out.
That's fantastic. So I had a question. What comes first? Is it the idea, the inspiration, the character, when it comes to writing that book?
So I think with my women's fiction, no, you know what? I'm going to say across the board, it's always a nugget of a plot idea first. There's some little piece of something, for example, with Pretty Revenge, I had the idea of doing something about a woman, a child, witnessing something through a window of one of her neighbors and something going wrong with that, and then seeking revenge 15 years later. And then I started thinking, who would the characters be that would be involved in that idea? With Perfectly Famous, the new book, I knew I wanted to write a book about 2 big female characters who had big obstacles to overcome in their lives. Obviously, one is a bigger obstacle than the other. Ward DeFleur is one of the main characters. She's a huge crime novelist and at the beginning of the book, you find out that her daughter has just been abducted and attacked and killed.
Mhm.
And you also find out at the beginning of the book that the other main character, Bree Bennett, who is a big Ward de Fleur fan and a former journalist, has just undergone a divorce and is looking to fill that void in her life. And so I wanted there to be these big obstacles for these women to overcome. And I wanted them to be able to not only help themselves, but help each other.
Mhm.
And I wanted one to be pursuing the other one in the book.
Mhm.
So that was sort of the beginning of that idea. And then I thought, well, why would someone flee? Why would someone be pursuing someone else? That person has to be someone famous or someone they know or something like that. And then that sort of leads to the character development and then further fleshing out of the plot.
I love it. So do you follow an outline or do you see where the story leads you?
So with all of my women's fiction novels, I was contractually obligated to an outline.
Okay.
So, but they didn't have to be very detailed. They sort of had to be skeletal outlines that showed that I knew where the book was going and what the main, turning points would be. And I often changed those outlines as I was writing because I don't think you truly get to know your characters until you write them to a certain degree. With Pretty Revenge, I made the big mistake of not writing any outline, much to my agent's chagrin. And I thought, I'll just, I'm switching genres. I'll just go with the flow. I'll see how this works. And when I say it was not a good idea, what happened was that it was a very heavy editing process on the back end. So I needed to really overhaul the book a couple of times after it was written, which I'm not used to. I'm used to delivering a pretty clean first draft, certainly that needs an editing process, just not that needs two massive overhauls. So learning from that mistake with this book, Perfectly Famous, I wrote a 30-plus page outline, extremely detailed. And I did not diverge from that outline with the exception of changing the ending as I was writing the last line. It was a pretty big divergence, but that was the only thing I changed. And this was the easiest book that I've ever written because I had worked so hard in the outline phase to really get every plot twist and turn fleshed out and what I thought was going to be the ending.
I love it. So how do you organize yourself as a writer? How do you keep track of your ideas, inspirations, and characters?
I have a document which is an outline and also has a section for just notes that I make for myself, like what the character looks like. Sometimes, believe it or not with the main characters, but with second or third characters, you're like, did I say they had brown eyes or green eyes at the beginning? So you sometimes need to refer back to that, or I'll write little snippets of scenes that are not like within the outline yet, but that I know I want to happen. So everything goes into this one outline/notes document. I know people use like sticky notes and move things around. That's not my jam.
It's okay. Do you share your work along the way or do you wait till it's completed for others to read?
That's a really good question. I do not share my work along the way. Every now and then I shouldn't say it. Every now and then I'll send like a little bit to like my editor or something, just so I make sure like moving in the right direction. But I don't even think I did that with Perfectly Famous. Maybe I did like the first few chapters and then I just hit the ground running. But no, aside from my editor and my agent, I don't show it to anybody along the way, which I know is crazy. So many people get feedback from like their parents, their significant other, their friends, their writer friends. I don't want feedback. I don't want to know anyone's opinion on it until it's where I want it to be, and then I want my editor's opinion for sure.
I love it.
But not my husband's. I mean, he has an opinion on everything, so I know that he would have an opinion, but he's not a big reader, and he's not a big reader of the kinds of books that I write. So while I do value his opinion very much in anything that I do for business and anything that I do with my brand, The actual book writing is not something that I call on him for.
Yeah, I think you just have to be mindful of who reads it, who has, who understands the genre, who understands the mechanics of writing, who can give you the right feedback that's gonna be needed, as opposed to someone who's just like a plain old down the street vet. It's like, I barely read a book, and here's my feedback on how you should write the book.
Right, exactly.
So yeah. So what is it like to write a page-turning mystery thriller?
It's tough. I'm not going to lie, because there's so much out there already and so many ideas that have already been used and taken, and how many times can you kill someone off, and how many people in the book could it really be? It's got to be someone in the book, So it's not always just a surprise of who it is, but it can also be a surprise of how and why it's that person. And even if it's not a whodunit, even if it's something like a book about revenge, like Pretty Revenge, you have to really make sure that your plot twists and turns and the arcs are landing at the right moments. So for example, with Perfectly Famous, there was one big plot twist, not the ending, but one big plot twist that came, like huge plot twist that came before that. And I moved it up a little in the book. When I was writing the first manuscript, because I thought it came too late.
Okay, that's interesting. So do you know the outcome, or were you surprised when you surprised as you write the book, or as you come up with the outline? Do you know the outcome of it? You mentioned that the ending was different, but other things, you knew it before it happened, or was it something surprising for you?
Usually I know the ending either before I start writing or somewhere along the way. This was the first time where there was legitimately an ending that I did know, and I decided to rewrite that ending as I was writing the end of the book.
Gotcha.
There was an unresolved piece for me that I didn't know how it would really come together in the end, and it ended up working well that sort of became the ending rather than the ending I had imagined would be.
Yeah.
And the ending is left a little bit open in this book.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, definitely. So there's not really 100% answer. I think you're still left with questions, which I like. Some people do not, by the way, and they let me know that.
Yeah, I think it was just one of those things. It was an open-ended ending. It was like, but then when I look back, I thought, oh, it makes sense. Like it did.
Yeah, I mean, you can use your imagination as to what happened. It's not like, oh my God, I don't know, but yeah.
So this book has a few twists. How do you come up with them to keep the reader engaged?
I do a lot of thinking about what people will figure out, how many hints to give, whether to lead people toward something or not to lead them toward it. Where the twists will go, how they can be unique. Honestly, sometimes I'm sitting on the couch and my husband will come home from work and he's like, what are you doing? Because I'm just sitting there, like staring off into space. I'm like, oh, I'm working. This is me working. This is me thinking of ideas. He's like, oh, okay. You go right ahead and do that.
So what are some of your upcoming projects?
So I am working on my next book now, book number 8, which I can tell you is about 3 huge social media influencers who are all competing for a very big distinction, which is Influencer of the Year by the Forbes Magazine Awards. And they live in Upper East Side Manhattan, and their daughters are all the same age and go to the same private school. And these 3 women are tough, and they will claw their way to winning this award and stop at nothing, do whatever it takes to make sure they win.
Gosh, I can't wait to read this book. I'm always fascinated with social media influencers. Like they're
Same. So I'm excited to write this one. It's in the process of being written, and also, which is super exciting, Pretty Revenge, my last novel, which came out last summer, was optioned for a television show. So right now, the writers who are amazing TV writers and who've written some huge shows, which I'm thrilled about, are writing a pilot and a projection for where the series would go.
Oh, this is
I hope to be able to announce where it will land very soon.
That's really exciting. Congratulations.
Very exciting. So I have my hand in that a little bit too. I mean, I'm an executive producer, when the show comes to air, but right now I am trying to let the writers do their job. It's hard not to, put my 2 cents in, but I have every faith that they're going to come up with something amazing. So I'm staying out of it and less asked.
I feel you. That's amazing. Congratulations. So,
thank you.
So let's go to a round of book recommendations. This is an opportunity for you to share with our audience what they should read next. What is your favorite genre?
I love the genre that I write in, psychological suspense, thrillers.
Who are you?
And women's fiction.
Okay. And so who are your go-to authors?
Kimberly Bell,
Mm-hmm.
Wendy Walker, Liv Constantine, Sarah Shepard. And then in the women's fiction realm, I love Jane Green. I love Brenda Janowitz. I love Emily Giffin, Jennifer Weiner, to name a few. Liz Fenton and Lisa Steineke, always love their books as well. Allison Wynne Scotch. I just have a few. I read a little bit, so I just have a few favorite authors.
I love it. What has been a book you read this past year that you love?
I loved Big Summer by Jennifer Weiner, and I loved the Grace Kelly Dress by Brenda Janowitz. I'm now reading Stranger in the Lake by Kimberly Bell, which comes out on June 9th, or I think June 9th. And those are my favorites so far.
I love it. Where can you find you online?
You can find me at emilyliebert.com. That's my website. You can always email me through my contact page. And the best place to follow me is on social media. I'm Emily Liebert on Instagram. I'm Emily Liebert on Twitter. And on Facebook, I am author Emily Liebert. So I love when people write to me. I love when people comment. I answer every single message. If I don't answer your message, I somehow didn't get it.
Okay.
Just know that, because I answer every person that gets in touch with me. That's my rule.
That's so good. Well, thank you, Emily, for being on the show.
Thank you so much. And if anyone has a book club, I'm happy to Zoom with you, Skype with you. So reach out.
I love it. Thank you.
Or send book plates, send signed book plates. Always happy to do that too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, or rate and review the show. This is the easiest way to support this podcast. Want to join a romance-loving community? Want weekly book recommendations, monthly author Q&As, and book recommendation meetups? Make new friends? Then join our Patreon community. To sign up, please follow the links in the show notes. What to Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts to love on frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.